I swear, if I hadn't stopped walking that morning, I never would have heard it. It was a thin, desperate sound, like a baby bird stuck between two branches. I froze mid-step, my boots halfway sunken into the soft moss by the edge of the trail. The forest was unusually quiet for late spring. No wind, no birds, not even a squirrel. Just that sound. Sharp, urgent, heartbreaking. I turned my head, listening. It came again, high-pitched, repeating, close. I stepped off the path, brushing past wet fern leaves and ducking under low pine branches. The sound grew louder. Then I saw her. A lynx, or what was left of her. She was sprawled across a patch of flattened grass, her body still warm, but lifeless. Her side was torn open. Maybe a coyote? No, too clean. Likely a poacher's trap. I knelt beside her, eyes scanning. And there, tangled up in the fur of her chest, were two tiny, trembling shapes. Lynx cubs. Their eyes were still a cloudy blue, too young to understand what had happened. One was mewing frantically, the other clung to its sibling, silent. I reached out slowly. My hand shook. I've never raised anything wilder than backyard chickens, and even they made me nervous. But when I touched the loud one, it didn't run. It sniffed. Then, without hesitation, it pressed its head into my palm. Jesus, I muttered. I looked around. No den nearby. No sounds of other animals. Just the forest holding its breath. And these two. I wrapped them both into my flannel jacket, against my chest. They were warm, but thin. I could feel their ribs through the fur. Back at home, I placed them in a cardboard box lined with old towels and turned to my dog. Mazie, I said, I need your help. Mazie was 11, a mutt with a shepherd's coat and a golden retriever's eyes. She'd raised her own pups years ago and mothered everything from kittens to a baby squirrel once. She patted over and sniffed the box. Her ears flicked. She looked up at me, then back down. She lay beside it. One cub poked its nose through the towel. Mazie licked it. And just like that, she became their mother. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the image of the mother lynx. Her body, the blood, the way the cubs had curled into her, not knowing she was gone. What was I doing? I wasn't trained for this. I didn't even know if they could survive without a real lynx to teach them. But when I peeked into the box at 2 in the morning, Mazie was there, tail curled around both cubs, her chest rising and falling slowly as they slept between her paws. 3 days passed like that. Every hour was feeding, cleaning, warming. The louder cub, I started calling him Rusty, cried if Mazie left the room. The quiet one, I named her Fern, stayed close to her brother, eyes wide, taking everything in. I called a local wildlife center to ask for advice. You'll need to wean them off within a few weeks, the woman told me. But if your dogs accepted them, that's half the battle. I didn't tell her I wasn't planning to hand them over just yet. Something about them, about Mazie with them, felt right. Like this strange, fragile little family had found itself in my kitchen. 1 week in, they started walking. Stumbling, mostly, their legs still unsteady. Rusty bit everything. Chair legs, my shoelaces, even Mazie's ear. She tolerated it with a groan. Fern watched first, then copied him. Quieter, gentler, always following. Sometimes I'd catch Mazie looking at me with a kind of sad patience in her eyes, as if she knew what I didn't, that this couldn't last. But for now, I didn't care. I just knew I wasn't letting them die in that forest, and I didn't expect that one day they might leave me instead. By the second week, our house sounded like a jungle. Rusty had discovered how to climb onto the back of the couch, and Fern had figured out how to push open the screen door if I didn't lock it. Every morning started with chaos, little claws scrabbling across wood floors, Mazie barking half-heartedly while chasing them in slow circles. They were growing fast. Too fast. Mazie still acted like their mother, but they didn't look like puppies anymore. Their paws were too big, their ears too pointed, and their eyes, sharp, yellow, wild, reminded me every day that they weren't pets. Still, I let them sleep on the couch, chew my slippers, and knock over cereal boxes. The truth was, I liked the mess. After so many years of silence in the house, this was noise I didn't mind. One afternoon, I sat on the porch drinking lukewarm coffee while Fern hunted a moth under the steps. Rusty leapt from the railing onto the grass, misjudged the distance, and rolled sideways. He popped up a second later, looking around like he hoped no one saw. Mazie sighed beside me, head resting on her paws. "Still your kids?" I asked. She flicked an ear but didn't move. That same week, I took them both for a short trip to the local hardware store, hoping to expose them to more people and sounds. I kept them in a crate in the back of the truck. They hated it, howled the whole way. When we got there, a young couple with a little girl came over to see them. I warned them. They're wild animals, not cuddly kittens, but the girl reached her hand through the crate bars before I could stop her. Rusty lunged and snapped. He didn't bite. Not really. But his teeth grazed her fingers. The girl yelped. Her mother scooped her up and gave me a look that burned straight through my chest. "You shouldn't have those things around people," she hissed. I nodded, unable to say anything. Not because I disagreed. Because I did. Back home, Rusty didn't act guilty. He was pacing by the window, tail twitching. Fern was curled up in Mazie's tail, watching him. That night, I sat at the table staring at my hands. Mazie sat beside me, quiet. I knew what she wanted, what she feared. "They're just babies," I said aloud. They didn't mean it. Mazie didn't respond. 3 weeks in, they started stalking. Not play hunting, not kitten pouncing, real stalking. Low to the ground, tail straight, eyes locked. I saw Rusty do it to a bird on the fence. Fern tried the same with Mazie once, and Mazie let out a low growl that stopped Fern cold. That was the first time I'd ever heard her growl at them. Still, I told myself it was fine. Natural. They had instincts, sure, but they were raised with love. That had to count for something. One morning, I found a dead mouse on the doormat. Not chewed, just placed there, like a gift. The next day, a squirrel. By the end of the week, I was finding something new every morning. Once, even a half-eaten crow. I stopped leaving the back door open. Mazie was growing more distant. She still laid beside them at night, but during the day, she kept to herself. Watched them from corners. Didn't join in their games anymore. I hated that. I missed her. She had been mine long before they came. But then, one evening, I came back from town and saw something that stopped me cold. Rusty was standing on top of the kitchen table, staring straight at me. Fern was on the counter, pawing at a loaf of bread. Mazie stood between them, unmoving. I dropped the bag of groceries. Everyone flinched. Mazie didn't. Her eyes were locked on Rusty's. Not with fear, not anger, something deeper, like a warning. I realized then, they weren't babies anymore. And Mazie? She knew it before I did. It was the first warm Saturday of May when I noticed Fern was gone. Not just hiding, not napping, gone. I searched every corner of the house, under the porch, around the shed. No sign. Rusty was curled up in the barn loft, unconcerned, licking his paw. Mazie was pacing by the back fence, nose in the air, tail stiff. I called for her. Loud, then louder, but only the trees answered. By sunset, I'd walked the property line 3 times. My flashlight flickered through thickets and ditches. Nothing. I barely slept. At sunrise, I opened the back door, and there she was. Fern stood on the porch, chest rising hard, fur matted in places. And her mouth, red. She wasn't limping. Didn't look hurt. But her face was wet with something dark, and when she turned her head, I saw blood on her neck. I reached for her. She hissed. For the first time. It wasn't loud, but it was enough to freeze me mid-step. Mazie came out, stiff-legged, and stood between us. Fern's ears flattened. She turned and darted under the porch. I stood there for a full minute before moving. An hour later, I went into town. Just groceries. Small talk with the cashier. That's when I heard it. "You hear about the Mitchell's cat? Found it dead by the edge of the field. Torn up pretty bad." I didn't breathe. The guy behind me in line chimed in. "Coyote, probably. Or a bobcat." The cashier shrugged. They said it looked fresh. Blood trail led right back toward the trees. Scared their kids half to death. I paid in cash and left. Back home, Fern was asleep in the barn, curled beside Rusty. I looked at her face. Clean now, like nothing ever happened. I didn't say a word. That night, I sat on the steps with Mazie beside me. "They're not safe here," I whispered. "Are they?" Mazie didn't move. "They're not pets." Still nothing. I don't know what I expected. Advice? Approval? Maybe just someone else to carry the weight of the choice. I spent the next day watching them. Fern didn't hiss again. She played with Rusty, climbed trees, chased moths. But every now and then, she'd freeze mid-movement and stare at the woods, like she was listening to something far away. Rusty hadn't left the yard in weeks. He was bigger now, almost my knee height, but still leaned into my side when I sat down. He didn't seem to care about the wild, but Fern did. That evening, I opened the old wildlife crate in the barn. Just left it there. I didn't know what I was doing. Maybe preparing myself. At dinner, I barely touched my food. My thoughts looped like a broken tape. What if someone else gets hurt? What if I wait too long? What if I let them go and they die out there? Mazie didn't eat either. The next morning, the crate was tipped over. Fern was gone again. Rusty paced the barn for hours. He cried, "Hi." Pitiful sounds I hadn't heard since they were babies. Fern came back that night, again stained around the mouth, again silent. I knew. The wild had her. I stood by the door that night, one hand on Mazie's head, the other on the frame. I could smell pine sap and damp dirt. Everything felt on edge. Fern looked at me from the tree line, just for a second. Then she disappeared, and I made a decision. Not tonight, but soon. I'd have to let them go, because keeping something wild locked behind walls doesn't make it tame. It only makes it angry. I waited 3 more days. Then they were both gone. No paw prints, no broken branches, no overturned trash cans. Just absence. A silence that pressed against my chest like a hand. I checked the barn, the shed, even the rafters. Nothing. Mazie sniffed the yard with urgency, her tail tucked low, circling like she thought she missed something. Then she stopped, lay down by the fence, and didn't move for hours. I called their names until my throat was raw. Rusty, Fern, again and again. But they didn't come. By the 5th day, I started sleeping on the couch again. Just in case. I left the porch light on. I kept the back door unlocked. Mazie barely ate. Her eyes stayed on the woods. At night, I'd catch myself dreaming about the sounds of claws on the floor. The yowl Rusty made when he couldn't find his toy. The way Fern used to perch on the windowsill like she owned the place. I started seeing things out of the corner of my eye. Flickers. Shadows that moved too quick. But when I turned, nothing. Just trees. A week passed. I stopped checking the woods. I started putting their bowls away. I folded the towels they used to sleep on, stacked the crate in the barn, tried not to think about the smell of their fur or the sound of Mazie's low growl when they played too rough. She'd aged 5 years in a week. I couldn't shake the guilt. Maybe I waited too long. Maybe I raised them wrong. Maybe it was all just a selfish fantasy, thinking I could love the wild into staying tame. Neighbors asked once or twice. I lied, said I'd released them on purpose, that they were doing fine. I didn't want to hear the lectures. They didn't understand what it meant to hold something so untouchable, so feral, and have it trust you. To feel it curl into your chest, and know it could kill you one day, but still stay. 2 weeks after they vanished, I finally locked the back door before bed. That night, I heard the noise. It was almost nothing, just a tap. I sat up, heart pounding. Listened. Another tap. A pause. Then one more. Not loud. Just enough. I walked through the dark house without turning on the lights. Mazie was up too. Her ears were perked. Her body tense. We reached the kitchen. There, on the glass of the back door, was a single smear. Long, thin. Fresh. Like a paw had slid down the window. Mazie growled. Just once. Then went quiet. I opened the door slowly. Cool air rushed in. The porch light flickered. Nothing moved. But at the edge of the yard, just beyond the glow, 2 shapes stood. Low. Watching. I couldn't move. Rusty's eyes caught the light. Fern's body shifted behind him, just out of full view. They didn't come closer. Didn't make a sound. Just looked. Mazie took a step forward. Then sat. I did the same. We watched each other for what felt like hours. My chest ached with something I couldn't name. Not grief. Not joy. Something else. Then, slowly, Rusty turned. Fern followed. And they vanished into the trees again. I didn't go after them. I just closed the door, sat on the floor, and cried like I hadn't cried since I was a boy. They were alive. They remembered. And for now, that was enough. Summer crept in slow that year, like it wasn't sure it was welcome. The trees were thick with green. My garden, mostly weeds now, buzzed with bees and flies. Mazie spent her days napping on the porch, too old to chase shadows, too wise to care. It had been nearly 2 months since I last saw them. I told myself it was over. That night on the porch, the paw print, the shapes in the dark, was their goodbye. They were wild now. Out there, living the lives they were meant to live. But not a day went by that I didn't scan the tree line. I stopped talking about them. People forgot. Or at least pretended to. I didn't. One evening in late June, I was closing the chicken coop when Mazie froze. Her head lifted, ears forward. Her whole body leaned toward the woods like a magnet was pulling her. I followed her gaze. 2 shapes. near the fence line. Taller, broader, full-grown. My heart stopped. Rusty stepped forward first. His gait was slow, deliberate, like a soldier walking through memory. His coat was thicker now, brushed with silver. His eyes, still that same gold, locked with mine. Behind him, Fern lingered. She had changed the most. Slender, sharper somehow. Her face was older, but her gaze hadn't softened. They didn't make a sound. Mazie stood beside me. I felt her lean into my leg, just a little. I took a step forward. They didn't flinch, but they didn't come closer either. Rusty sat. Fern stayed standing. No fences, no leashes, just space between us, measured in more than distance. I knelt in the grass. "Hey," I said, voice barely above a whisper. Rusty blinked. Fern tilted her head. The sun was setting behind me, long shadows stretching like arms across the yard. Fireflies blinked on. Somewhere in the woods, an owl called. They stayed. For minutes. No movement. No fear. Just watching. It felt like a reckoning. Like they'd come back not to return, but to make sure I was still here. That the place they started from hadn't disappeared. Mazie let out a soft whine. I scratched behind her ear. "They're okay," I said. "They're okay now." And I think, somehow they heard me. Rusty stood first. Turned. Fern followed. Neither looked back. They slipped between trees as quietly as they'd come. The next morning, I checked the yard for tracks. Found none. Just the crushed grass where they sat. Mazie sniffed the spot, tail wagging slow, like a memory moving through her body. And I smiled. Because I knew I'd never see them again. But I also knew I'd never feel alone in that place again either. Some goodbyes are permanent. Others are promises.